report. It sounds like a satisfactory outcome, and one that would get us closer to a proper criminal investigation of the conduct of some officials in this matter. But thank you for the update. Much appreciated. Barring any other counsel who'd like to say something, I'm going to go to Advocate Krause.
Justice Advocate, the evidence leaders wants to lead a witness first. Thank you.
Very well. Advocate Guchana.
Thank you, Justice Msaneke. The next witness we have for today is Mrs. Ina Grobler. She's an occupational therapist from West Coppice. My colleague, Advocate Ina, will lead her.
In Pretoria, we call the place West Coppice.
West Coppice.
Certainly not West Coppice. Okay. It's not far from where I was born. That's why I know this.
No, I know it as well.
Yes.
Justice.
Thank you. Mrs. Ina Grobler, would you put your full names on record, please? Is your mic switched on? It is? Yeah.
Ina Grobler.
Thank you. In which language do you want to testify?
My first language is Afrikaans, but I can testify in English, it's fine.
You're happy to testify in English. Do you swear that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth? And if so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Justice.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. At Viscopis.
Yes,
For how long have you been employed at Viscopis?
for 23 years.
And before that, did you work anywhere else?
I qualified in 92. I studied at the University of the Free State and got my bachelor's degree in 92. I worked for a year at Timbisa Hospital and transferred to Weskoppies Hospital in April 94.
Thank you. And what position do you currently hold at Vescopis?
I'm currently a chief occupational therapist.
Is it correct that you were part of the team that was tasked to implement recommendations by the Ombud in 2016 and 2017?
Yes.
Yes, if you could go to volume 1 or file number 1. Page 58 of the bundle. The numbering appears on the top right corner.
You mean page, volume, file 1?
Yes, Justice. File 1, page 58.
Yes, thank you.
On the right column, those are the recommendations, and the relevant one for you would be recommendation number 13. Am I correct?
Yes.
Justice, if I may introduce two documents which will assist us. It's ELA 118 and ELA 119. I believe that they've been placed before you. It's a report, a short report that was compiled by the witness, as well as a her CV. It was circulated to the colleagues via email.
Yes, that is fine.
Thank you.
I've got Ella, excuse me. I've got Ella 117. Could you say this Ella 118 and 119?
It's 117 and 118.
Yes, I've only 117. I beg your pardon. I have both. I apologize.
Thank you, Justice. In your report, on the first paragraph in your report, you indicated that you were to implement recommendation number 13 of the OMBAT. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. Will you please briefly tell us what exactly did you do in implementing recommendation number 13?
After the release of the Ombudsman report, different teams had to go to different NGOs and do a screening on the patients, on their mental health care users.
I'm sorry to disturb you again. Obakeng, that we have to switch that off. It's right next to Ms. Grobler and it's cutting out her voice quite a bit. Thank you. Would you repeat that, please?
After the release of the Ombudsman report, different teams were identified who had to go to the NGOs and assess the mental health care users with the aim of moving them to contracted facilities.
And you were part of the task team.
I was part of the task team also identifying occupational therapists who could assist in this. It was quite a lot of mental health care users who had to be assessed. It's more than 300 mental health care users. That was quite urgent to assess and move out of the facilities. So it was not possible for one person to do that. So most of the occupational therapists at Weskoppies Hospital indicated their willingness to do this, as well as occupational therapists from districts, Pretoria region and also Ekurhuleni, and also therapists from Sterkfontein and Tara also indicated their willingness to do this.
Yes, thank you. And then did you visit the NGOs where the mental health care users were kept?
Yeah, I visited one NGO, one specific one, and my colleagues visited other NGOs.
Do you still remember the name of the NGO that you visited?
I visited Ubuhle Benkosi.
Where is Ubuhle Benkosi?
It is on the R55 route, just outside Centurion.
That would be in Pretoria.
Yes,
Council, can we
Pretoria.
put a date to this, please?
And when was this, when you visited the Ubuhle Benkosi?
It was the 1st of March,
Which year?
2017.
Yes. Were there patients that were kept at Ubuhle Benkosi?
Yes. There were, I think, 34 mental health care users according to the list who was at Ubuhle.
Can you tell us what did you observe, if anything, at Ubuhle Benkosi?
The mental health care users were outside when we arrived there, and then all the different disciplines just went on to do their specific assessments. So the OTs there, I was one of 3 OTs that day, and we started with our screening of the mental health care users. It was close to lunchtime, so at that point then they dished up lunch for the users. So we used that as part of our assessment to see what are the patients able to do. My biggest concern at that point was that they didn't have tables for the users to eat at. The
If I
users
may
had-
ask you to just go a bit slow so that you could also take notes. If I may ask, were these adults or children that you found at
they're
Ubuhle
all
Benkosi?
adults, all males.
All males.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yes, then they were serving them lunch. How did they serve lunch?
They dished up in the plates and then gave to all the users, but there were no tables. The plates had to be on their laps, and that's how they ate. So the users who was not able to, due to either tremors or side effects, and maybe in coordination, was not able to effectively eat.
Were
and that
there
was a
any that you
problem.
observed who had tremors or who were immobile?
Sorry, say again?
Did you observe any patients who were immobile or who had tremors?
There were 2 patients that was of concern, that they were not able to, the plate started sliding off their laps and they had to be assisted, otherwise they would not have been able to eat. But that was a concern.
how was the food served how was it served on the patients? Were they queuing to collect the food, or was it brought to them, or were they sitting around the table?
Yeah, well, they were sitting on chairs outside under a roof, and the food were brought to them. There were no tables. There was one table, but most of the users, in fact, all of them did not sit at a table.
Yes. Anything else that you observed?
The users did struggle to some of them struggled to walk. They were not able to move their chairs themselves, so they were physically not well. There was no activities that we could see, no occupational therapy program, no meaningful activities for them to do. And they were just basically sitting on the chairs the whole time we were there.
On the observations that you made, did you inquire from the caregivers there if there were any, if they, under normal circumstances, assist those patients who are unable to feed themselves?
I did not inquire because the whole team was there that day. They were helping different team members. The social workers had to check the files and had different scopes of practice that day. The doctors had to assess the patient. So all the team members had different responsibilities that day. So I did not ask that question.
And you said that there were no activities for them to perform for the
Yes.
patients. And what is the effect of that in relation to mental health care users?
Well, occupational therapy believe in meaningful activities, in engagement and participation in everyday tasks and occupations. And that is the purpose of activities for mental health care users, and that it also gives them meaning. And it also serves the purpose of maintaining abilities and also ensuring optimal functioning. That is the purpose of activities. So if there are no activities, users will just sit and actually will deteriorate. That is also a way of ensuring that they are able to do what they're supposed to. If you just feed people and if you don't facilitate them to, for as long as possible, do it themselves, then they deteriorate and you actually do not address any possible emotional well-being that there might be.
I see. And then what type of these activities that you would have expected at least to find?
At least, usually you would find games that they could do, but if patients are of such a level that they cannot do it themselves, they would need facilitation from someone. But at least if there is table games for them to do, the other kinds of activities could also be craft activities or even like gardening. There's lots of projects that you could have at NGOs. The idea would also be to have kind of activities that a person would find in their normal home environment. So even themselves helping dishing up their own food or helping or make their own tea, make their own beds. That is all everyday activities that they
That's
should
to find a meaning in life.
that also adds to meaning in life because then they will have a purpose.
I see. And then
Mrs. Grobler, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Council. Did you find any healthcare users who you had not brought along at Ubuhle-Benkosi? Were there any healthcare users who were there, already employed there?
I'm not sure about that. I think the quality assurance people from the team side were dealing with that matter. As far as I know, there were no healthcare workers there, just the owner of Ubuhle.
If I may tell you, your pronunciation is perfect. It's amazing. Ubuhle benkosi. It's just as a Zulu-speaking person would call it out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. And what did you do with those patients? Did you manage to assess them?
Yeah, to do a complete assessment was not possible. An occupational therapist would need between like 2 and 3 hours to do a complete assessment. And you also need to involve users also in an activity, and that was not possible. So we just did a screening on all the users there. But we did screen all the users at Ubusli at that, on that day.
And what does screening entail?
The screening entails a basic assessment, the cognitive ability, the affect, ADL, their ability to communicate, their self-care, and if there was any possible thought process disturbances. So it is a mental health assessment, and that was also the reason why it was important that occupational therapists with mental health experience had to do this assessment, the screening.
From the occupational point of view, what did you observe out of the screening?
There were a few users who were acutely psychotic. They had thought process disturbances. They were disorientated. They were not able to communicate effectively. And that would lead you. So that would be a problem if maybe they were not on the right medication or even taking effective medication. And also the level of functioning was quite low of most of the users there. So the implication of this is the amount of supervision or care they would need. That would be the implication of it.
Do you know if those mental health care users were removed from Ubuhle Benkosi?
After the assessment, all of the users had to be removed, but on that day, one specific user was removed with an ambulance because of his physical condition.
What was his physical condition? Do you remember?
He had to be removed the day before, and the Ubusli did not allow that. So only on the day we did the visit did they allow the ambulance services to remove him. He was physically not well. I don't know exactly what was the physical condition that led to him not being well.
Can I take you back just to an earlier evidence? You say you found some of the users being acutely psychotic.
Yes.
In other words, their thought processes had been disturbed.
Yes.
And then you say others had a low functionality level. Now, is it the same category that was both psychotic with low functionality level, or you're talking about separate users?
The one who was psychotic was on a low functioning level, but some of the others, the assessment model we use is the occupational therapy model of creative ability. According to that, we place people according to their level of functioning. So most of the users at Ubusli were on the lowest 2 levels of functioning.
And what would that mean? Can they walk?
Most of them could walk. There were 1 or 2 who needed just assistance, but they could walk, except for the one who was physically not well.
Could they use their upper limbs?
They could use their upper limbs, but there were 1 or 2 that had, it could be due to side effects, but they had tremors. Usually psychiatric medication can cause severe tremors.
And those who were psychotic in assessment, how would one describe them, the balance? I'm sorry, I'll repeat again. I say you told us some of the users were acutely psychotic. Was there any other category of users? besides those who are acutely psychotic?
There could have been, but we didn't have access to diagnosis or files. So we just did the functional assessment.
So you did mainly a functional assessment.
Yeah.
Could most of them speak?
There were one who did not speak. That again could be because of the psychiatric illness. I don't know why he could not speak.
But the rest could communicate effectively.
I won't say effectively. A lot of them, because of their psychiatric condition, was not able to communicate effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. The ones that that you could communicate, did you speak to them?
Yes.
Did you receive any complaints or any information from them?
Because it was lunchtime, I did inquire about lunch, inquired about food, and do they get something to drink. Two of the mental health care users told me that they only get once in the morning something to drink and not anything then for the rest of the day.
And they were, well, you said then they were subsequently removed, all of them. One was sent to hospital and then the others were sent to Life Esidimeni.
Yeah. I'm not sure to which places they were removed to, but the purpose of it was to assess them to be removed.
Now, with the lack of
I'm
activity...
sorry to interrupt you again. What was their state of nutrition? And were they emaciated, or did they look, had a good physical look?
I won't say a good physical look, but there were a few who did look maybe not that well nourished, but not to the extreme extent. I didn't see anyone that looked extremely malnourished.
Thank you.
Did they look clean, tidy?
The basic hygiene was fair. They were clean. They were fairly tidy. Yeah.
Did you get to see the wards where they were kept, other than the places outside where they were eating?
Only the dining room area. I didn't see where they slept, the sleeping area. I only saw the dining room area.
From the occupational point of view, was it okay? Was it in order?
It was quite small.
For the number?
For the number of people there, yeah.
Now, with the lack of activities that you highlighted earlier on and stimulation programs, would you say Ubuhle Benkosi was fit for the purpose of keeping mental health care users?
No, I don't think so. It was a house on a small holding, and the outside area was just one area that they could sit, the roof, and it's not big enough, so and the inside as well. So there's definitely, I don't think it's suitable for that amount of people that was there.
Was there a single story or a double story house?
It was a single story.
And was it fenced? Was it properly fenced?
Yeah, there was a fence around the house.
With the security or personnel?
There were security. When we left, we had to sign in the visitor's book, but not when we arrived there.
Was that the only NGO that you visited during this project?
I also visited one of the Ribafenis, but not as part of the relocation team.
When was that?
That was, I think it was, it could be 2016, November, December. I'm not sure about the date.
And what was the purpose of visiting Ribafeni?
At that point, it was I was told to join one of the teams to see and investigate what was happening at the NGO. So, but on that day, I also assessed the users at Ribafeni.
What did you find at Ribafeni?
More or less the same as at Ubuntu. The users, it was myself and another therapist, and we assessed all the users there, and they were also different psychiatric diagnosis. There were also people who were still psychotic, they were more or less the same level of functioning. There were maybe one or two who were a bit higher, like on the third level of functioning. That place was a bigger area.
Do they have the activities and the stimulation programs for the patients?
I did not see any activities or stimulation programs.
And was that all that those two NGOs that you visited?
Yeah, that's the only two I visited.
And the medical conditions of those patients, were they good?
The physical condition of the people at Ribafeni was fair. I did not see anyone who was not in good physical condition.
And the area, was it suitable?
That area was, it was just recently before we visited them that they started to use that area, but so it was quite bare. It was close to a stream. That was a concern. Users could walk down to the stream, and that could have been a risk to them. And the house was a double-story house, and that was also a problem identified by the team.
If you could just read the summary of the findings from your report, the last row.
Yeah. Just the last sentence or the whole summary?
The whole summary, please.
Okay. The summary was also from the other NGOs that was visited by my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And then
what are those NGOs?
They were Tsepong and Shama and then also Ribafeni.
Are those the dates on which the visitation took place?
Yes.
Can you read them on record? Start with Tsepang.
Tsepong was on the 14th of March, the 15th of March, the 16th of March, and the 29th of March.
And which year was this?
2017.
Yes. And then in respect of Shama House?
Shama was also 13 March 2017. And then Ribafeni, the 6th of March 2017.
And then read out the summary of the findings?
At some of the NGOs, the mental health care users appeared unkempt and had poor hygiene. There were no activity programs for users, no stimulation. And some of the NGOs' mental health care users were left unattended for long periods of time. And one of the NGOs, one of the users complained that their medical conditions are not dealt with when they complain to the owners or the managers of the NGOs. And there were poor interaction between the staff of the NGOs and the users.
And after you had conducted the assessment, you were also of the view that the mental health care users should be removed from those NGOs?
Yes.
Thank you, Justice. That will be all.
Thank you. Advocate Hassan.
Good morning, Ms. Grobler.
Morning.
My name is Adila Hassan, and I'm one of the legal team that represents the families of 65 deceased. I'd like to begin with your description of Ubuntu Benkosi. Can you just recall how many people were there, how many mental health care users were on the day that you visited?
According to the list that we received, there was 34 users. I think there was one, I remember on that day that it was a problem. One user we could not find, but I think it was 34 users there.
And you said that the place wasn't big enough for that many mental health care users.
Yeah.
So the license for Ubuhle Benkosi is a license for 50 people. I assume if the place wasn't big enough for 34, it was clearly not big enough for 50.
Definitely not.
Not. And when you visited the NGO, do you recall which street it was on?
I don't recall. It is at the back of Centurion, and I did travel on the R55, but
You
no,
don't
I don't
remember the
recall.
address?
No,
It wasn't Bart Street by any chance?
it could be.
Could be.
I'm not
I'm
sure.
just asking because there are different addresses for this NGO in our records. It's Bart Street in the license, and then in the audit report for the NGO, it's described, the address is described as plot number 15 von Willich Street.
I think that is the one I used. The other street does not sound
Doesn't
familiar.
sound familiar. I mean, they both are listed as being in Centurion. But does that sound familiar, von Willich
The
Street,
von
not the
Willich,
other?
yeah.
They're just different addresses on the licenses and the audit reports. So thank you, just assisting me to understand it better. You also said that there were acute psychotic mental health care users.
Yes.
In terms of the overall layout and the services that were being provided, would you say that it was suitable, it was a suitable facility for severe psychiatric disabilities?
I don't think so, because there's a lot of risk involved in severe psychiatric illnesses and a risk for injuring themselves or other users. So for that reason, I wouldn't say it's a suitable area, but a home environment, that is a better environment than like a hostel kind of setup.
Yes. And is there a difference between the terms severe psychiatric disability and chronic psychiatric disability?
Yes, a chronic psychiatric disability obviously is a long-standing illness, but so a chronic psychiatric disability can be severe as well. But otherwise, acute psychiatric illnesses probably, well, they can be severe as well, but it's not necessarily the same thing.
So chronic would point to a long-standing condition,
Yes,
a continual condition.
yes,
Right. And the condition could be severe or not.
yes.
There are two licenses that have been that are on the record for these proceedings, and the one license says it's a facility for persons with chronic psychiatric disability, and that was a license that was signed by Dr. Manamela. And there's a second license that's signed by Dr. Salabano, and that is for persons with severe psychiatric disability.
I don't think it's suitable for severe psychiatric disability, but even for chronic psychiatric disability, because one of the aims of working with chronic mental health care users is the aim of deinstitutionalization. And the NGO was quite on the outskirts of Pretoria, so it is on a small holding, so there's no possibility for them to go different places. So that would be a problem as well, but I would say definitely not for severe psychiatric illness. as I said, because of the risk of possible injury to themselves or other people.
Thank you. If it was on a small holding, was there any, what type of integration would there be with the community? Or were they isolated?
I think they were quite isolated, and because the access gates were locked, you couldn't just leave unless someone opens for you. So it did seem quite isolated, and there would have been little or minimal interaction with other people or with the community.
And are you familiar with the National Mental Health Policy on Deinstitutionalization?
I am.
Would you say that moving patients to an NGO like that would be consistent with the aims of deinstitutionalization?
I don't think so. You would. My understanding of it is that the environment should be close to the home environment, and it should facilitate having like a home environment. And also with reintegration into the community, and with also trying still, although the mental illness is a chronic illness, you would still try and maintain current abilities or even improve if possible. And for that reason, it would not be suitable to have them at an isolated place outside a community. I think also looking at the stigma around mental illness, for that reason you sort of keeps them marginalized if you just let them stay on isolated places.
And the occupational therapy, that program would be a very important element of the care of mental health care users, you would agree?
Yes.
And you spoke a little bit about the consequences of not having such a program, and that users could deteriorate without that type of stimulation program.
Yeah.
Would you also say that they would feel abandoned?
Definitely. For lower functioning patients, the stimulation would be important. When they are a bit higher functioning, you would focus on, the aim would always be to try and rehabilitate them back into the community. And part of that rehabilitation into the community is also interpersonal relationships and contact and support from family and the community. So if they are isolated within certain psychiatric conditions, they in any case feel rejected. That's why, and a lot of the mental health care users, just from my experience from Weskop's side, do feel rejected, and they don't want to go to NGOs or places like Life Esidimeni. They want to go back to their families.
Yes.
The reality is sometimes families cannot take care of them or cannot deal with a mental illness. But yes, they definitely feel rejected and abandoned.
Tell me something, Ms. Grobler. On your understanding of the national policy on deinstitutionalization, does it permit taking somebody out of a larger institution to a smaller institution, but still away from home?
I think the Mental Health Care Act says least restrictive environment. So when the psychiatric condition is stable and they don't warrant admission anymore, they need to be removed from like Weskop's hospital. And then, but some users do require constant supervision, constant care. And that's the problem. A lot of families cannot provide that or are not able to, for whatever reason, to do that. But my understanding is that it shouldn't be these large institutions. It should be smaller institutions that represents the home environment, which means it should be smaller houses within the community to allow for that to happen.
So taking people to a place like Ribatheni or to Ubuhlebenkosi where there are 34, you said, is that consistent with the expectation, with the policy expectation? Would 34 people in that environment approximate or be like a home?
I think if you have a suitable environment, 34 would be better if the house has enough rooms, if you could recreate the home environment. But having people sleep in these dormitories, that would not recreate the home environment. So you should have a suitable area that users do not maybe share, or even that might not be practical, but then still that they share not with 12 other people, but maybe only with 2 or 3 other people. That would also create a more homely environment.
Yeah, because the very term deinstitutionalization denotes a moving away from an institution, regimented activity in limited space for many people. I can see your head is going, but we need to record your answer.
Yes.
Is it consistent with your understanding of what must happen here? I know nothing. It's actually a question I was asking. It may not have
Yes.
sounded as one.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that is my understanding, that it should be smaller, and the stimulation or the activity program, the ultimate would be, the ideal circumstances would be to cater for all the users there within their interest, within their abilities. But for that you need also qualified people, and we know that is a problem, that the NGOs cannot afford qualified people. So to have that ideal program, you would need regular occupational therapists to try and implement such a program. But just a stimulation program or knowledge about mental illness would also allow them to understand not to do everything for mental health care users, but to, as far as possible, help them, enable them to be independent and to optimally function. And that requires a lot of things. Also the effective management of the psychiatric illness, because the users that we did see who were still acutely psychotic, it could be that that is the best that they are, but it could also be that they were not effectively treated.
And if the acutely psychotic ones, if you had anything to do with it, would you have kept them at Ubuhlebenkosi? Or would you have rather kept them in an institution, larger like Vescopis or Life Esidimeni?
I think if there is no inappropriate behavior or aggressive behavior, they could stay at an NGO. Personally, I would think that a smaller place would be suitable, because I think in a big place it becomes like a dormitory. It becomes a clinical environment, and I think it removes the dignity of people with mental illness, and it removes, it could also institute low mood, depression, other psychiatric illnesses that was originally not the problem.
Advocate Housen.
Mrs. Krobler, you said that you didn't have access to the patient's medical files. Were there files for each patient?
There were files, but I think the files that were there were actually taken there by the task team. I'm not sure if Ubuntu themselves had files for the users, because we actually had to start a file for them to be relocated to a different place. So I don't know if they had their own files. The files we had there were actually started with the task team.
And would they have been able to take care of the users properly without files, without knowing the details of the diagnosis and the medication and that type of information?
They definitely need files for the correct administering of medication. But the NGO will also need to have knowledge how to. They might have access or knowledge of the diagnosis, but still not know how to handle people with that diagnosis. So that does not automatically mean that if they had files, they would have known how to handle the users.
And you say you also visited Rebafeni,
Yeah,
and you said this was in 2016.
yes.
And you didn't see any activities or stimulation programs.
Yes.
And who asked you to visit Rebafeni to assess the users?
I was asked by head office, Department of Health, but it was unclear what I had to do there. So the team that I went with that day didn't know what I had to do there. So I was there, so I helped the occupational therapist from the district who was there that day to assess the users.
One of the family members of one of the deceased testified before these hearings, and that was Mr. Lucas Mokwerane. And his family member, Christopher, was at Rebafeni, and he said it was somewhere near Dipsloot. Is that the one? And I understand there to be several Rebafeni homes. Is that the one that you visited?
I don't think so. I visited the one also like outside Pretoria, Centurion. I think there was one that side, but we struggled to find the place. It was not, we couldn't find the house initially.
Do you recall the manager's name?
No, I don't.
It wasn't a woman by the name of Nolene.
I don't know.
Mr. Mokwerani testified that when he went to visit Christopher, he was very thin and very hungry, and he was crying. And he said it was the first time in 30 years that he'd seen his brother cry like that. And one of the things that, apart from many other things, one of the issues was that there was not sufficient food at the NGO. Did you observe anything in relation to food and nutrition and the supply of food when you visited Rebafeni?
We were there the whole day, so they did give also then during lunchtime. It was a scheduled visit, so that day I did not see anything that was concerning, but I don't know if the food are always like that. Because they did have on that day they had fresh apples, fresh fruit, apples and pears. So I don't know, but it could have been just for our benefit.
And did it feel isolated? The building itself, the location, did it feel like an isolated location?
Yeah, because it's also in a small holding, so the houses are not that far apart, but it is isolated as well.
One of the things that Mr. Mokwerani said to the proceedings was that Christopher and the other users at Rebefeni kept asking, where are we? And they wanted to leave. And that's why I'm asking whether that would be consistent with this questioning. Where are we? They seemed lost.
They did. They were users that was from Weskoppies like earlier years. And when they heard I am from Weskoppies, they did ask if they could go back to Weskoppies. That day there was one user whose father came to visit. But we had to use the help of the caregivers to assess some of the users because they could not all speak Afrikaans or English. So we had to use translator, or I had to use a translator. So some of the users did say they haven't had contact with their families. They don't know if their families know they are there.
And was there any follow-up done from was that reported to the department, first of all, this concern from the users?
I did report to the people I was with, the team I was with. There were several teams that day, and none of the teams actually were very sure what their role is that day. They were a team from head office, they were a monitoring team from head office, there were 2 or 3 mental health teams from Tshwane district, but it was not clear exactly what each team's role was that day.
Was there somebody in charge? So was there a leader of the teams?
I did not observe someone specifically to be in charge.
And when you refer to head office, what do you mean by head office?
I think it is a team that was, I know there was a social worker, a mental health, registered nurse that was seconded to start an investigation. I think it was just very soon, I'm not sure. I think it was very soon in the process. So I was just told I had to be there, but without clear indication what I had to do there, what was the purpose of it.
What were their names?
The social worker, I can't remember now. I can get the names and I can give the names to you, but I cannot remember now.
But by head office you mean the provincial Department of Health?
Provincial department, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you just find, observe, or talk to anyone who was in the NGO about payment of subsidies by the government?
No.
There were no complaints about payment of subsidies?
I did not talk to anyone about that. It could have been some of the other people there, some of the other teams, because there were people who had to look at the environment, at the structural part of the building, the nutrition, all the requirements according to the licenses, if they are a driver, if the medication is sorted, and according to the licensing agreement.
And did it meet the requirements of the license?
No, what I do remember, not all the requirements. If I remember correctly, one of the requirements is that there should be a separate person for, like, it cannot be the same person that's the driver and the cook, and it needs to be separate people. And I know that was a problem. I think the transport was also a problem. That was a complaint that the users did not follow up, which meant that they defaulted on medication because they didn't get the medication in time.
And by follow-up, you mean visits to the local
To
clinics?
Yeah.
And that's important because these are NGOs, and
That was the agreement that most psychiatric patients do monthly has to get their medication. And if they then not take them to the clinics every month for their follow-up, then they won't take their medication.
Mr. Mukurani also said that the manager, who he called Nolene, said that they did not receive subsidies and they had to go to ShopRite and ask for donations for food. Did you see a meal program? You say on that day it was a scheduled visit. I heard you. But is there anything else that you observed in relation to food and nutrition?
There were also a dietitian there that day, so I only did the occupational therapy part. So I don't know at all about the nutrition or the meal plan.
And from your layperson's observation of the structure, what did it seem like to you?
Again, the structure that a concern was mentioned because it was a double-story building that, and there was not enough security. The windows could open and there were nothing, so someone could fall out of the window. So that kind of risk, it was a problem. And then the environment, if a user is not able to physically to be independent physically, the environment could be a risk in that regard as well. But the outside space were big enough, except the risk of the stream that was close by, and that was not fenced off. So it is possible that someone could wander off, and that could have been a risk.
The stream?
Yeah, like a small river.
Is it the Henops Rivier?
Yeah, I think so.
I do think it's the same venue as Mr. Mokranani was talking about.
Okay.
That all of the descriptions that you provide are consistent with his. Did you see any leaking pipes or doors falling off their hinges?
I was only in one area, so I did not walk around and see anything like that, but I did also not look for things like that.
And Mr. Mukranani also said that as you entered it on the outside, it seemed okay, the place. But once you went inside, you saw the full, what he described as the horror of what it was. Does that sound familiar to you? Is that familiar with what you saw?
It could be. We were in the office area, so, and just a small, I'm not sure if it's a dining room where we assess the users. So I didn't see the rest of the buildings or the sleeping area or the kitchen or any of the other areas.
But you did observe that safety was a concern, being double-story and housing those kind of patients who might jump out of a window, and then the stream and the risk of drowning.
Yeah, and also the stairs, because that could also be psychiatric medication can cause physical kind of problems, tremors. So it could also pose a risk in that regard.
And you had said earlier that you reported the concerns of the users. To whom did you report it again?
The people I went with to the place was not willing to take me back. So one of the mental health coordinators took me back to the hospital. And then I did report to in general, to the mental health coordinator.
Do you remember the person's name?
I'm sorry. There was No, I don't. There were so many people that day. Don't remember his name.
And do you know whether there was any further follow-up visit to the NGO?
I think I don't know. I can't. I don't want to assume anything, but I don't know. I was not involved further than that day, so I don't know what happened after that.
And which other NGOs did you visit?
I only visited those two.
Those two.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying today. I have no further questions. Justice.
Sure. Advocate Krause.
Thank you, Justice. Ms. Grobler, my name is Lila Krause. I act with my learned friend, Mr. Skibbe, for survivors of the families, and we're instructed by Legal Aid South Africa. Could I ask you to please go to file number 7? Somebody will assist you.
Thank you.
File number 7, page 2565. 2565. We know from the Ombuds report that at least 2 people from Ubuntu has died there. But the list on page 2565 are a list of patients that we received that were supposed to be there. You will see there's 35 if you count them. I see they're not numbered, but we've counted them. It's 35. Did you find 35 people there that day, did you say?
I can't remember exactly how many patients were there. I think the list we had, it was a struggle to find all the people
To
on
verify.
the list. So the quality assurance person who went with us as part of the team sorted that out. So we saw all the people who were there that day.
Could you just remind us
But
what
the evidence is 34 people so
Yes.
far, isn't it?
you've
At the
That-
beginning of your evidence, you said
Is it
34.
Yeah, that was the list of names we had going there.
Okay. And could you just remind us your reason for going there?
That is, after the Ombudsman report, all the users had to be screened and assessed to be relocated to better facilities.
If I take you to that list in front of you, you would see, for instance, the second last person on the list, that's probably the easiest one to get to now, a Mr. Sopi, you will see there's no diagnosis there. Is it possible to properly treat somebody if you don't have a diagnosis?
I don't think so. Well, psychiatric, although only the psychiatric diagnosis seemed to be mentioned here, but there could also be other diagnoses.
You
So
need others as well.
you need all of it because it could even like hypertension or
Or HIV.
or HIV.
And
yeah.
you need medication for both.
Yeah.
So, but if you don't have even the psychiatric diagnosis, that's dangerous, don't you agree?
I agree, because you also need to know what to look out for. If you don't know that you have a user with schizophrenia, you also won't know when the illness requires maybe admission.
If you go a little bit up the list, there is a name in bold. Do you see it?
Yes.
Mr. Motsamai. And same as there's no diagnosis. Do you see that?
I see.
And what is worrying to us is that there's also no family involvement, no ID number, things like that. How will that affect the treatment of a patient?
I think because the aim would be for all healthcare professionals to have people functioning optimally. If there is no diagnosis, then you won't be able to give medication which could improve that person's functioning. If there is no ID number, as far as I know, then it has implications for disability grants,
For the SASSA grant?
for the
yes.
SASSA grants.
And especially if the service levels agreements are not in place, it means not enough money. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, you've seen this place. We know that there are 2 bathrooms and 1 shower. Will that be sufficient?
No, I don't think so, because again, out of occupational therapy perspective, you want people to be independent and also to protect their dignity. The ones who can wash themselves, who are independent, that they can carry on with that. But if there are only 2 bathrooms available, it means that they might not, there is not suitable facility if people also want to do it on their own time. So that just actually creates more institutionalization, because things has to be done according to routines and probably very fixed routines to get all the activities of daily living
But where
done.
do you get that information from the assessment report?
Yes, I will take it to that if necessary, Justice. Can I just ask you, as you saw the people there that day, would you have left them there without relocating them?
No, a lot of them were quite distressed because I think they were concerned. Their families didn't know where they were. Some of them were from Johannesburg area, and it was quite far. So they were quite upset about that as well. The ones who were better able to communicate did communicate that.
Yes. I'm going to ask you to just go to page 2534. It's just a few pages before that one. Do you have the document in front
Yes.
of you? It is an audit checklist concerning Ubuhle Benkosi, and it's got the date on there, about the fifth line from the top of the 9th of September 2016. Do you see that?
Yeah. Yes.
So we know that at that stage there was an audit being done. That's less than a month before the service agreement was signed with this place. And my learned friend had already told you that the address on the license and the address on this differs. This refers to Van Vellig Street, whereas the license refers to another address. But it says on there that there were 5 bedrooms and at 1.1.4. Do you see that? And then they give the beds per bedroom. You didn't see that yourself?
No.
What comes out of this, and I'm not going to waste time, is that they're concerned about the ventilation and that there's not enough space for 50 people. But this was kept open after September 2016. What would your response to that be? With not proper ventilation and with this number of people?
I think that would be a problem if nothing has changed since the time I was there.
If you turn one page, page 2536, in the middle of the page at 5.2, 5.3 and 5.2, 5.4, it says there's no caregivers with a post-matric education. There are 6 caregivers who have grade 10 to 12, and then 7 caregivers with a grade 4 to 9 qualification. Would that be sufficient staff to look after 34, 35 people?
I don't think so, not with the qualifications they have, but I think because the people at Ubuntu were all of them quite low functioning, which I do think require a bit more skills.
And would require at least the OT?
OT, mental health, registered nurse, a professional person, yes.
Can I just ask you, just on that, I just want to ask you one more question on that. If you go to page 2564, did you see any people sleeping in buildings outside? Or were all the people housed in the house?
The team were informed that they, at that place, at the small holding, there were horse stables, that they were concerned that they used the horse stables as places for people to sleep. So the NGO did deny that, but what I observed, I can only say what I observed, and that was there were blankets outside these stables.
Because if one look at page 2564, it says that there were 2 inside toilets and 4 outside toilets. Do you see that?
Yes.
How will an outside toilet assist if a person is sleeping inside the house? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I don't think it could be a risk. Well, then if they leave the doors open, then that would in any case be a risk. But if people would walk around at night, that could pose a serious risk to the mental health care users.
These reports, and I just have to put it to you in fairness to the person that drafted this report, found that there was sufficient place. That's against your finding. Your finding is that there wasn't sufficient place there.
Not what I saw
Yes.
to be effective.
Yes. Thank you. Just very
I
lastly.
don't understand the question, though. Look at page 2564.
It says the place is big enough, but the building that currently is in use cannot accommodate 50 users, as indicated. Only 36 can be accommodated now. And this witness's evidence is that 35 people were too many for the place. So this report differs from the witness justice.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yes. No, I forgot.
The language is inelegant, but it seems to say the license says 50, but there were 36 people there.
Yes, but it also says it's not big enough for 50 people.
Very well.
As I read it. When this report was done in September 2016, the patients were busy with gardening and sweeping. But when you were there, you didn't find any of that?
No. When we were there, most of the users did seem upset. Why they were upset, I think because that we do know that some of the problems before, when first moving to the NGO, users were not informed, they didn't know what was happening, and we do know that changes like that is discomforting to mental health care users. So when we arrived there, most of the users just sat on the chairs and they did not sweep. I don't know if at other times they do that, but not on the day we were there.
Thank you, Justice.
Thank you. Did you tell the users that you were there to implement recommendation 13 of the Ombuds report? In other words, that you were not in that language, but you were there basically to assess in order to shut the place down.
No, there were also a psychologist with our team that day. So, but we did try to ease the users and not to cause any emotional turmoil before, because the move. So there was going to be a team who would also help on the day of the move. So we just went to do the assessments beforehand.
Assessment,
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. You know, if you look at page 2564,
Yes.
the names of the NGO representatives are set out there. Can you see them? Did you meet there Ms. Mbacha and Mr. Mweketsi?
I did not meet them.
Did not meet them. Did you come to know who the owners, I'm sorry, who, well, it's an NGO, I suppose. It's sufficient that there are representatives, Ms. Mbacha and Mr. Mweketsi. Very well, thank you. Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. We have no questions for the witness.
You led the witness, by the way, so I must move on to Advocate Hutam.
Thank you, Justice. Dumela Mekhrobla.
Dumela.
Okay, you got what you wanted, right? testing, and found Ms. Robla equal to the task.
Ms. Krobler, you testified that you visited one of the NGOs by the name of Ubuntle Benkosi,
Yes.
and you said that like the house is a single story.
Yes.
Did I get your evidence correct when you said that you only observed the dining area of the house?
Yes.
And you said that you visited the NGO for purposes of making an assessment of the conditions under which the mental health care users were kept.
Not the conditions, assessment of the users themselves.
Or, so you did not, you didn't have to assess the surroundings or the place where they were housed.
There were other people part of the team who did that assessment.
Oh, okay, okay. And then your conclusions, I heard you saying that like you found the place not to have been suitable for the accommodation of mental health care users.
Yes.
And then if you have not assessed other areas of the house, would it not have been proper for you to have done so? For you to be able to reach that conclusion?
Ms. Robla is an occupational therapist.
Yes.
And she had gone to screen patients for their functionality, bodily functionality.
Indeed so, Justice. I'm just only asking the question in relation to what she has said. She has given the testimony that she has found the place not to be suitable.
Yes,
To the extent that-
from an OT point of view.
Indeed,
Sure.
yes. So, which is the reason why I ask her if would it not have been necessary for her to have observed other areas?
I see. Okay, proceed. Yes.
The witness clearly stated that the basis for her opinion was because there were no stimulation programs, there were no activities. From an OT point of view, the place was not suitable.
Yes. You're repeating the exchange we've just had, but we have an objection, essentially, that you ought to limit your criticism, if it's a criticism, with the understanding that she is an occupational therapist. In fact, head of occupational therapy at Vescopis. And she was expressing a view within the context of occupational therapy. I think you've heard the point already.
Indeed, so
So
Justice.
continue to ask questions, keeping that in mind.
Oh, well, Justice, I'll rest my questions on that
No, you don't have,
basis.
you don't
I
really
will-
don't have to. If you have a point to make, you're entitled to make it.
Ms. Krobler, can you just assist us? On what basis did you come to the conclusion that the house was not suitable to house mental health care users?
For the purpose of deinstitutionalization and and also the occupational performance that we would want mental health care users to do. The area where they eat, they should have a table to sit at. If they are not able to eat independently, it will be very difficult to eat if you have to eat from your plate on your lap. So because we promote the independence of mental health care users should be promoted, but you will not be able to implement adaptations or assistive devices or anything to allow people to be independent if they don't even have a table to sit and eat at. If you use a knife and a fork, how will you do that eating from your lap? These people do have psychiatric illness, they are on chronic medication, and that adds to barriers in their environment if they don't even have a table to eat at. So that is what based on that, I said that part is not suitable for people to live. If you need to accommodate people for a short while, it could have been acceptable. But keeping in mind these places should be the place where these people will need to call their home. It was not effective enough for that purpose.
And that consideration should have also been applicable to the ablution facilities, not so?
Yes, the users who takes psychiatric medication, they tend to drink a lot of water, and that obviously also requires from them to use the bathroom quite often. So it could have implications there as well. If the toilets were outside and the users had to use the bathroom during the night, that would not have been acceptable. It poses risk if there is no supervision and people, or if they were not even allowed to unlock the door, go outside to use the bathrooms, for example, then you will not promote independence, because then users could develop infections or incontinence or lots of other problems. And I think it's also a basic human right to have access to those facilities whenever you need them.
And you only observed the dining area?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. Ms. Grobler, thank you very much for your assistance. There are no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you, counsel. Advocate Tina.
Thank you, Justice. Mrs. Grobler, you said you struggled to find the area. Is that so?
Yes.
Is it accessible to public transport? Do you know?
I think it is accessible. I don't know if there is public transport. It was, I was quite early there, so I had to wait outside. So there was not a lot of traffic.
Did you see any taxis driving past by?
If there was any, it was like one taxi, but I did not see a lot of. There were a few cars moving in that area, but I did not see public transport.
Do you know if it's close to any clinics?
As far as I know, the closest clinic to that area is probably Laudium Clinic.
Which is about how many Ks maybe?
It's difficult for me to say.
One
I think it's
estimation?
not close.
It's not close. Thank you, Justice. That would be all.
Die plek is in my kontry. En heel waarskynlik is die distansie 30 kilometers. Wat dink u?
It's possible to orientate myself in that area. I don't know at all.
Yeah, it's a fair answer. I don't know, it's a fair answer. We'd like to thank you, Auntie Joanne, others to thank you for coming and helping us in this difficult case. 2 people had died by the time you went to Ubuhlebenkosi. 2 users had died in July and November 2016. And you went 2017.
Yes.
You have said already you didn't know why it was left open throughout the time and shut down only after the Ombuds report and after you were sent to go and assess with your team and others. You probably don't know why it was so.
I don't know.
Very well. Once more, thank you for coming out. We appreciate this.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. It is 1:30, and I think it's appropriate to adjourn now for lunch. Are we having our meeting as suggested yesterday? Perhaps from 2:15 to 2:30, if that's still the view of
That would be
council.
suitable.
Is it
That
suitable?
would be suitable. At 2:15, we'll come to your chambers, Justice.
2:15.
That's in order.
Okay, very well. East for Squirn. Thank you. We are adjourned till 2:30.